And we're proud to be one of the global Social Media Week sponsors, especially here in London, which is my new adopted hometown as of earlier this year. Today's panel, the Insidious plot to socialize the enterprise, is a topic that's kind of hyper-relevant given the theme of this year's Social Media Week conference, change through collaboration. I think the days of, everyone would agree, the days of social media experimentation are really over. Many people, and especially leaders, are realizing that, C-suites have stopped asking if they need to do social and starting to talk about how they need to do social and how they need to do it strategically to meet their business objectives. As these leaders are moving their organizations to the next phase of social media adoption, many are realizing that socializing their enterprise is not just having a Facebook strategy. It's about fundamental changes to the way that their organization operates and behaves, and that's what today's panel is really all about, that inside change. It's a somewhat personal anecdote, but yesterday Ogilvy launched Social at Ogilvy, which is our new global cross-discipline social media practice that links together all of Ogilvy's social strategists globally into one community of practice. For one of the world's largest agencies, this was certainly no small feat. We spent the second half of last year really developing our vision and framework and then strategically aligning our leadership around it. We worked with local offices around the world to help them adopt this framework and really make it their own, which is, as you know, one of the great ways to kind of socialize things, any ideas, but especially social media. The result of this is Social at Ogilvy, which will help us all at Ogilvy continue to infuse social media into the solutions we offer our clients, whether that's PR, CRM, or shopper marketing. Our clients are making these changes too. We asked Ben Edwards and Ray Day from IBM and Ford respectively what social media and this change meant to their organization, and this is what they had to say. Let's see if this plays. Nope. Hold on.
This fictitious wall between PR or communications and marketing that a lot of companies have seen through the years is not productive. Social media has accelerated the pace of working together.
Social networks allow people to associate based on who they want to associate with. Take that thought and then ask yourself, how's that going to change the company? It's going to have a very profound effect, in my view.
Social media done well is operationalized and instituted throughout the business.
This concept of social media for business outcomes or social business is now really being discussed at the very top of the company.
When we look at our metrics and we look at the tracking and how well we told our story at the Detroit show this year, we just killed it on social media. We use far more video, far more use of graphics, a much more conversive way of telling the story. You're seeing the shift of resources, and we're taking from the traditional ways that we told story and you're moving them to the modern ways that we tell stories. That's created new opportunities and new jobs that we hadn't seen before.
At the very front of the buyer's journey, before they even understand the nature of their problem, all they know is that they're hemorrhaging cash. We have an opportunity now in modern marketing organizations to intercept at that very, very early stage and start shaping shared understanding and belief. If we don't experiment and learn, we're never going to get to understand what sort of programs we need to go do. Social media is definitely a phenomenon. It's a long-lasting effect. We're not even sure of the end destination yet.
If you're not playing in the space, you're being competitively left behind. The way we're introducing products, social media has changed that dramatically. After that one day of introducing the Explorer on social media and combining that with traditional media and combining that with some paid media, we had more exposure than any auto show we've ever done, and frankly had better exposure and better buzz than even a Super Bowl ad. So it was quite powerful.
So some interesting insights from two of our clients. We're lucky today to have Alex Hultgren from Ford, as well as John Mell from IBM, Carl Barkey from American Express, and Ogilvy's Chief Digital Officer, Brandon Berger, who will help facilitate our panel on the Insidious plot to socialize the enterprise. So welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Can you guys over there in the kitchen, can you hear us okay? Yeah? Okay, good. All right. If you could, grab a bite to eat and then maybe pass some hors d'oeuvres around would be great. No, thank you guys all for being here. It's great. And first off, happy Valentine's Day to everybody. I just want to, I hope you guys are all set for that. I'm really happy and honored to be here. And I just want to give a congratulations to Caitlin and the entire social team on the amazing launch of Social Ogilvy. Social Ogilvy is a huge platform for us. It's a huge priority. It's across the globe, every market. We've got 120 countries are involved with this, and so it's I give you a ton of congratulations on that. Thank you very much for that. It's wonderful to be here. It's wonderful to be here with these brilliant top decision makers here that will share wonderful insights. You guys will be blown away. They're going to be amazing. I'm just putting some pressure on you guys, right? Okay, so just social has really transformed organizations from top to bottom. I mean, from a product side, we see a real shift in the way people create products, how they think about that process, how it changes, what happens, what's created, the idea that we're always living in beta, that we're constantly reacting, that any product you create really has to be constantly iterated, and you always have to be listening to what your consumers are talking about. You guys can hear me in the back of the room? Great, excellent. So we've got a few slides to talk about. I don't know if you realize this, but this is pretty amazing. I didn't know this. I mean, how many people think about, when did you guys think social really started? Facebook, MySpace, maybe GeoCities. The reality is IBM started social in 1970s, in the 70s. Can you guys believe that? With a group of 370 system programmers that basically used a horizontal collaboration tool that now has evolved into IBM Connections. I mean, this is amazing because this was even before the visual web existed. IBM has been pioneering this stuff, so it's pretty powerful. So Ray Day mentioned this. I don't know if how many people have seen this? This is pretty unbelievable. But so Ford launched the Explorer in 2011 on Facebook. There was a huge, very powerful community of people that loved the Explorer, that had grown up with the Explorer, and then Ford activated this group and rallied this. And you know what happened? It was a 3-time shopping lift above what they would normally have, and that's almost equivalent to a Super Bowl advertisement. I mean, think about that. The Super Bowl is a huge media phenomenon, and the fact is, social media is just as powerful. So this is pretty interesting stuff that's happening. How many people have done Link Like Love? A couple. So I gotta tell you something. Amex is blowing my personally my mind when it comes to social. This weekend, I've got a quick little anecdote. This weekend I was shopping in Whole Foods in New York, and I checked in on Foursquare, and lo and behold, there was an offer that saved me $10 if I spent $50. Obviously, it's Whole Foods, so I spent way more than $50. But immediately my card was given that offer and it was transacted. Link Like Love is a bunch of savings and opportunities that you can engage with on Facebook. These guys are pioneering the intersection point between social and commerce and enabling consumers to engage in many different ways in terms of their spends. So I give a huge congratulations on that as well. And really, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I don't know if you realize this, but social is changing every aspect of the enterprise. I mean, whether it's customer service, anytime you have a problem with a product or a service, tweet it. I promise you they're listening and they're reacting. If they're not listening, they've got a major problem on their hands. It's changing HR functionalities. It's, in fact, changing the way products are created. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this company called Quirky. Does anybody know this company, Quirky? So in the States, they basically, the idea is that, how many people have had that idea? Oh, well, I wish there was some tool that I could plug in my iPhone that would charge it when I'm rolling on my stroller with my kids. Anytime there's ideas like that, this platform basically takes those ideas and makes them real. So social is changing every single thing we do across the enterprise, across consumers, across product development. It's pretty amazing. And while marketing and communication remains a strong proof point, it's really changing all aspects of companies today. And so there's really a larger social business story to get into, and then we're going to talk about that with these guys today. So Caitlin introduced everybody, but I think really what's important is just quickly tell us about yourself and what got you into social and what got you on this path. I'll start with you.
Okay. Should we?
Yeah, grab a mic.
Maybe introduce your title and everything.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name again is Alex Hultgren. I'm from Ford Motor Company. I'm the digital communications manager for Ford of Europe, which is printed over my head. Sorry. Anyway, delightful seeing you all, and thank you again, both Brian and Caitlin, for having us here today. Appreciate the opportunity. It was interesting when this question came up because I thought about how long I've been doing digital things and whether or not I've been around for the 1.0 version of digital and what that looked like. And it was really telling because what I realized was with digital 1.0 or web 1.0, there was a big, you guys, can you still hear me? We're there? There was a big challenge because there was suddenly an asymmetrical amount of information that was flattened. And in the US, what that meant was because of the internet, did you get every other word? Are we good? Because of the internet, though, for a long time, consumers were completely in the dark from a pricing standpoint. And what happened from the automotive standpoint was suddenly the invoice price was online. And dealers and manufacturers forever had had all the information, they held all the cards, and suddenly it was flattened. And the organization didn't know how to react to that because it had been the same way for 50 years or even longer. And if you're not familiar with this concept, go down to Marrakesh and try and buy a rug. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. You have no idea what the price should be. All you know is what you ended up paying for it. Now, you fast forward to what's happening now with social media, which I find really interesting because, again, it's a huge challenge to the organization. But this time, it's the communications challenge. It is no longer just a one-way monologue, which in public affairs and in marketing we've been doing forever. It is now a customer dialogue. And if you have a Facebook page, consumers expect you to respond to it. If you've gone to the trouble of setting up a social media presence, they want to have a social media experience with you, which completely changes the way we function organizationally. So we've gone from having marketing managers to also having community managers in all the markets in Europe as well as in North America. And someone that manages a brand line, for example, now has to have social media responsibilities as well for their vehicle line. So it's been very interesting for me to watch this. I started in digital back in 2000, back when, again, was 1.0. Did some other things in the company and came back in 2007 in the States and really was looking at how digital media would continue to evolve. Every time something new came, a new channel, whether it was gaming, whether it was social, or whether it was mobile, they all ended up in my group. So social became something that went from being just kind of a distraction, yeah, what are we going to do with this thing, put the intern on it, to a very, very important part of everything we do now at Ford, which Ray alluded to in the video. So I've been doing digital for a long time and social really since about 2007. And I came over to Europe about the same time Caitlin did, actually, in March of this year to work with the European team.
Carl?
So, hi everyone. My name's Carl Barkey. I'm a director of social engagement at American Express. I'm responsible for social media within our international consumer business. Yeah, interesting with a question around where do we start? You know, I started on the very early days of American Express journey into digital. I joined our company in 1998, danger of becoming a lifer in the company now. But at that stage, we were very much in the early stage of trying to understand what digital meant to the company. And I joined in our customer services environment, and that there was very much focused around how do we actually bring servicing capability to our customers in a digital way. And so the transformation from that point when we were truly thinking about what does our website look like, what are these transactional processes that we can put online, to where we are today is quite phenomenal. And I've taken a fairly unusual route through servicing strategy into actually sitting on the technology side of working with business partners to figure out capability strategy, particularly understanding how we think about digital capabilities. And as our business has started to evolve into social media over the last few years, the company has taken a truly big emphasis around digitizing our business. Social is at the heart of that. The opportunities just leapt out. And so I was one of the people that put my hand up really quickly to say that's definitely an area that I want to engage in. The power is moving away from the business to the consumer. We need to start to build dialogue, move away from this kind of broadcast marketing. And American Express is famous for our direct marketing, our ability to use data and drive targeting. And now that whole emphasis is changing around how we think about engaging with our consumers. So we're in the early days. and we talk about this plot to socialise the enterprise. We're really at the early stage of that, and it's a really exciting journey for us.
Okay. John?
Okay, hello everybody. My name is John Mell. I work for IBM, where I run our social software business for Europe. I'm a self-confessed job hopper, so I've worked for 6 or 7 companies over the past 10 years or so. Always doing things around the web and in various sales and management positions, and really understood the initial rise of the web, as we were saying earlier, about democratizing access to information and also really taking the friction out of business processes and speeding up transaction times and all these kind of things. And then what I was more interested in, which came around with social, was how do we actually then democratize access to people? So how do we actually democratize access to relationships and to people in the same way that we've democratized access to information with the initial web? And also when you look at, in terms of business processes, how we've driven a huge amount of cost out of automating business processes, but now all the friction and cost in business is around people. So what are we doing? How can we help take that same friction and cost out of people interaction that we did with initial business processes during sort of the early part of 2000 and since then? So that's me.
Great, thank you. Alex, you talked about price, being a big impact of how, drove change and how it helped transform your organization to become much more digital and then eventually much more social. In addition to kind of your marketing communications, for all of you, what areas of your companies are most impacted in this kind of new changing customer journey and around social media?
It's interesting, as Ray alluded to in the video, these imaginary walls between the organizations, those silos actually were very real for a long time at Ford. There were distinct divisions, and they did what they did best, and at the highest levels there was interaction, but that was really about it. And again, in the old way of doing business, that was efficient, that worked for a long time. But that's all changed now, and you're right. It isn't just public affairs and marketing. I think there were really 3 other key areas that have been affected by social media, probably in ways that none of us saw coming. Excuse me. One, first and foremost, was the IT department, because suddenly they were used to having control over the websites. Now you've got this semi-owned platform called Facebook, for example, where it's kind of our assets, but we don't really have any control over it. As anyone that works at Facebook knows, they can change their terms and conditions or their layout, and you're completely at their mercy, and they don't really have to tell you what's coming. It just shows up one day and you have a timeline. So that's been a real challenge for processes that have been in place for a long time to protect our assets. So IT as a group has had to really evolve. Another one is customer service. Customer service is the division at Ford that owns a relationship with the owner. Well, if you're trying to build advocacy, the people that are usually most excited and enthusiastic about your products are the ones that have either just purchased one of your vehicles or they've in the first few months of ownership. And harnessing that excitement and turning it into something positive in the conversation in social media is something we're striving to do. So we've worked really closely with customer service as well. And I think the third group is our dealers. It's interesting in automotive because you have this huge network of franchise dealers that are really the names and faces of your brand, but you have no real control over them. You have kind of it's a franchise relationship. So because of that, we're suddenly in a situation where now, one, consumers can act directly with the brand, and 2, the dealers are trying to find out how they fit best in the social media landscape. Should they have Facebook pages of their own? Should they be interacting with consumers directly? Should they be putting retail offers on Facebook, for example? We've advised them not to, but again, they're all kind of learning their way. So I think those 3 key areas are also learning as we go. And to your point earlier, these are still the early days. I mean, even though we've been doing this stuff for years, no one's really got this figured out yet.
It's really interesting, and I'm going to go down the line, but I think what we're hearing here is that new org structures are need to be developed, and new reporting systems, newer levels of accountability where they intersect seem to be, it's organizationally a big change for the enterprise.
Yeah, I think that's true, and American Express is no different. And one of the things that we certainly have struggled with as we think about engaging in social is not representing our org structure actually in social networks and looking like a joined up organization, really presenting the enterprise. And I think similar to Alex, you have very specific areas that have going through a transformation, I should say. That servicing is definitely a key part. Brandon, you mentioned, tweet, and if no one responds, that's a bad sign. Well, absolutely, that's a reality for us. Customer servicing is very much at the forefront of really engaging within the social space. But I would say, even there, we're still early, because what we're really at this stage is effectively moving our channel. So we create a new channel, and it's still very much in the traditional sense of customer servicing. What we're really looking to aspire to is, how do you truly bring social to the heart of servicing, and how do you socialize your servicing business to actually allow your customers to engage in that servicing conversation? So that's one. I'd say HR is definitely a second component that is radically different. Even this week, I've had 2 or 3 different requests coming through LinkedIn for either recruiters or people looking for jobs, and I don't even work in HR, so it's, our whole recruitment strategy has transformed as we think about the HR space. But more fundamentally, organization is this, we will come back to it time and again, I think, is this breakdown of silos, is this need to begin to really work across the business, so that as we bring new products to market, as we think about new marketing campaigns, as we think about new opportunities in the social space, we actually bring the power of our organization together and represent that out in a social environment, as opposed to these bespoke individual teams that work in isolation.
It's really interesting to think about American Express, given that you are a service company, and how are you servicing the enterprise? And so it's really powerful. I think one of the themes we're starting to see here is that the ownership of social, which, when you used to think about the ownership of digital, it was a battle between the CIO and the CMO, but really what we're hearing here, it seems to be, this is accountability to the CEO, really, is kind of where it's changing. It's pretty amazing.
Yes, I guess to offer a slightly different perspective, we do a lot of work with social with our external customers, but as a B2B organization, IBM, it's somewhat slightly different than the other companies represented here. But I think we see also a lot of work that we have done around providing our employees with social tools to be able to work together internally. And when you start to look at it in that line, social, again, the same theme I think that's coming up, it gets permeated across all strands of the organization. So for us, it's very important that we don't make people feel that they do their day job where they're not social, they then stop and they get to be social for an hour on a Friday lunchtime, and they come back and they go back to their day job, right? That's a fail, right? You've got to permeate the social way of interacting across the whole organization, because I've never yet met anyone who has admitted, although they might have it, no one who's admitted to having an antisocial working environment or an antisocial collaboration inside the organization. But for us, it's very important to look at the culture, right? My boss has this saying that culture eats strategy for lunch, right? You can have the best strategy or the best plan around how you are going to be open, how you're going to collaborate, how you're going to empower employees to reach out to customers and work together across boundaries within the organization. But if your culture is set up so that's not the case, you're going to run into problems. And we see this, HR, yes, absolutely, both in terms of recruitment externally, but also in terms of identifying talent internally. So quite often we found when we're recruiting internally that rather than looking at whose turn is it to get the job or where they sit in the org chart, if you have access to a wealth of content that someone is producing within the organization, and you can see the social likes or the social metadata that is getting to show it's a valuable piece of content, that's a much better identification of talent and potential than an annual performance review. And the one thing where I think that hasn't been mentioned that we find a lot, both with IBM and customers, is internal comms. And this is where the culture element comes in. I was with one customer, which I won't name, but we were talking through with internal comms about helping them communicate and collaborate better with employees using social tools, and they kind of stopped me halfway through and said, I don't think you quite understand. This project is about making sure employees what we want them to read, right? And well, if that's your culture, no kind of technology or tool or Facebook or Twitter or widget or anything like that is going to help you. You've got a fundamental different issue there yourselves.
I know we have questions, but I think what's interesting is that you talk about culture, right, and managing that conversation. And if people are publishing, how do you as social business leaders, ensure that your brand is protected while at the same time your culture is disseminated and people are empowered to be a part of the conversation?
So, but there's two sides to it. So internally, It's a case of everything. It's slightly easier internally because your name is attached to everything. So there are plenty of ways to commit career suicide with IBM, which don't require social tools for you to do that, right? And if you want to use social tools to commit career suicide, go ahead and do it, right? It's absolutely fine. But it's not that all of a sudden I planned a way to really insult everyone in the company and lose my job, and I didn't know how to do it until this social tool came on, and now I can do it. Right, so we kind of we provide social guidelines both for internal and external use, which, by the way, we got our employees to write and our lawyers to sign off on, rather than the lawyers to write and the employees to get pushed onto. It's much better to ask a lawyer to sign off something rather than to write it. But the number one rule on that is follow business conduct guidelines, right? So we have business conduct guidelines that say if you are talking externally, don't go down the pub and don't talk about our results before we announce them to Wall Street, or don't go and talk about a confidential deal when you're in a public space. And that just applies to social. So we don't really have many official IBM Twitter accounts. Instead, we have 25,000 people who identify themselves as IBMers on Twitter. And we provide guidance, we provide coaching for them to do it. And when mistakes get made, yes, we try and educate people so mistakes don't get made, but equally, we invest just as much in making sure there is a plan to react when things do go wrong. And that's both internally and externally, and we practice it and we rehearse it, and we make sure that we're not caught by surprise. So it's not a case of take all the risk out, don't do anything that is likely to embarrass you. It's a case of having a plan to react to that, rehearse it, practice it, so when it happens, because it probably will, you know what you're doing and you can respond quickly.
I think that's, Brandon, that's one of the big barriers that we're still grappling with as an organisation, and we are not, I believe, where IBM is at in terms of really progressing that true socialization within the organisation. Brand for us is still a very strong asset, and we are still within a world where protecting that brand is really key for us. So it is a challenge. We have very well defined social media policies and principles in place, and actually we take all our employees through those. So on an annual basis, that's a rollout that happens, and that's important for us. And I agree with John. It's actually not that much different from general standard business guidelines. But I think we're still at the place where, going down the route of truly opening out to our employees the ability to talk about American Express or represent the brand within a Twitter or a Facebook environment is really the next big hurdle for us to move forward with.
Yeah, it's pretty similar. We do have social media guidelines, but they're generally business guidelines. It's common sense. And if someone's going to engage, even as an individual, in a conversation about cars, identify yourself as a Ford employee. Obviously, don't give away the company's secrets, but in true transparency, if you've got a certain point of view, make sure they know that it's your point of view as an individual and that you work for the company. And then, again, it's common sense.
Just real quick, if you do want, our social media guidelines are public. So if you just Google IBM social media guidelines, you can see them and copy them or whatever if you want to look at them for yourselves. But they're out there if you want to take a look.
A true example of transparency. It's great. Congratulations. Speaking of IBM, you guys have made huge strides in enterprise social, right? You've transformed not only aspects of your Marcom, but your product, IBM Social Business Solutions, right? Can you talk more about the genesis of Social Business Solutions? Kind of a little bit, tell everybody what it is with respect to enterprise change, and then what was the output and the catalyst to that? Yeah, so it kind of evolved, right? Rather than someone kind of, as all good ideas do, rather than someone in an ivory tower coming up with the next big thing. And I think, well, like you said, we were provide, and it's the culture thing again. So we've always realized that one of our biggest strengths, which is being a very big company, is also a big weakness in terms of actually finding people and being able to collaborate with people to get things done. So very early on, our culture was always driving, we need to find ways to make sure that anyone can contact anyone in IBM and find that person, right? And that's what drove the people in their spare time to develop this thing in the 70s that allowed us to send electronic messages or very early corporate email to each other.
And I think that, so the two drove each other. So the culture drives us to look at new ways of technology, and then we find new pieces of technology that allow us to drive the culture, and they kind of go hand in hand. It's not that one came first and then the other. We always look at both in the one in the context of each other. And then the actual offering came around in terms of when we looked at all these tools that we were using, and quite honestly, what happened with some of them, it was someone building something and sticking it on a server under their desk, and before they knew it, in a week, the whole of IBM is using it as a mission-critical system. And we said, well, we have to do something about that to make sure that that is something that we can rely on internally, but also maybe we should bundle that up and start selling it, quite frankly. So that's where it kind of came from. And then off of working with customers to refine it, because they don't want something that works for IBM, they want something that works for all of our clients. So, and then we use the software itself to drive the feedback. So we had a community, an ideation blog where people say, hey, I think it should work this way or that way, and the community votes on ideas, and our project management team comes in, and then they take the best ones and actually then feedback as to what they're doing it and how they're building it into the offering. So it's a very iterative process. It's not kind of someone somewhere in IBM had a great idea about social business and just made it happen. I mean, I think where we're going is right now, we sell social business offerings, but we're looking to, how do we take advantage of that in the way we sell hardware, right? I don't know, but we are looking at that, and we are looking at that and addressing that. So how do we actually then, just in the same way we said social doesn't sit in one place, it needs to be infused in the organization. So we're looking now at how we infuse social in all of the offerings we have. So it's a joined up thing that we are looking to deliver to clients.
I mean, it's pretty amazing, because IBM really, like you talked about before, social's been a core of the culture, right? Into whether it's a product creation, whether it's the way people can engage with each other, whether it's the brand, it's all connected. And so that's pretty amazing. Carl, I want to talk a little bit about Amex for a moment. Your brand positioning is all around personalized service and offering. I know, I've got the cards. Consumer social data and actions has to be enabling you to deliver this, right? This is core. How are programs like Link Like Love and your Foursquare, how's that stuff working? I mean, what happened internally? How did that even, I mean, it's amazing. The fact that I was in Whole Foods on Sunday buying stuff and saved $10, and it made me, and every time I go I can do that. It's really powerful. Like, how's it working, and how did you guys get there?
Well, firstly, I think you've really built those programs up, haven't you? So, so thanks for that.
This was brought to you by.
And yeah, it's an interesting thing. So I think the first thing about bringing those to life has been that we have a very clear vision from, and you mentioned it earlier, from CEO down, which is about how do we actually digitize our company? How do we move our company from this traditional business that has huge amount of threat, if you think about the payments industry and new players coming to the game, to truly innovate in the digital world and bring value to our customers, whether they be our card members or our merchants, because effectively Amex is one big network business, and that's really the big asset that we have to play. So, yeah, with that as an opening in the organization, what it really does is it creates opportunity to innovate, because the company then has a clear vision around where we're looking to go. And I think the one big thing that brought those two programs together was effectively this breaking down, and I talked about it earlier, of the silos between our merchant business and our consumer business, and bringing those together as organizations to truly think about how can we bring value in this social world that both benefits our customers and also benefits American Express. The Foursquare partnership was the first partnership we brought to life. We announced that at South by Southwest last March, and really that is actually just based upon the power of location-based servicing and the power of mobile to put relevant offers in the path of a consumer at a point that they might want to use it. And you talk about that check-in function. That's very much what that's about. And we have the ability to do that because we have that network business. And so that's been a really great partnership for us. Link Like Love with Facebook has taken that a little bit further. And that's really about beginning to tap into social data. So how do we actually bring personalization within the social space? And your Whole Foods offer is a great example of that. But it's very much about, can we actually begin to understand what our consumers like and engage with in the social space and bring relevant value to them in those areas. What I would say, though, is we are really at the formative stage still of those programs. We're still looking to understand how do we scale them? How do we bring them to multiple markets? How do we evolve beyond them? And how do we truly bring value back to the organization? Because at the end of the day, we want to be social, but we're about a social business. So at the end of the day, it's really about how do we truly drive value as a business as well. And so those programs are about social commerce, and they're about trying to really understand how you operate in that sphere.
You know, it's really interesting. I mean, in thinking about that, with the constant evolution of new products, right? So every day there's an app developer that's creating a new platform that's, Pinterest has 10 million uniques as of last week. So you not only have to embrace, but you have to be in a model of constant evolution, right? Because tomorrow's Foursquare could be, a whole new platform.
That's right, and I would say one of the other points that we have. So we are definitely continually looking at how social is evolving. But one of the assets that we really thought about as we looked at, particularly Foursquare, but also the Facebook, is we have so many merchants that accept the American Express card that there's no value for them to create their own Facebook space or their own Foursquare space. So what we were really looking at is can we create something that allows those merchants who accept the American Express card to then have the scale of the American Express distribution network. And social really provides that forum that truly no other channel does. And our proprietary platforms don't provide that. So that's one of the big advantages that we can bring to bear.
That's, staying true to your core and delivering value at a broader level is pretty powerful.
Yeah, actually, there's another program you guys did in the States called Small Business Saturday, which don't know if you want to get into it here, but go check on the YouTube. There's about a 2-minute video that summarizes it. But it's a great example, again, of public affairs and marketing working together for a very 360 campaign.
Speaking of breaking down the silos, Ray Day called it the fictitious divide. Alex, how are you crossing this cross-discipline divide to deliver, truly integrated social programs that you guys are already becoming famous for, whether it's the Fiesta movement, Ford Explorer, Facebook? How do you bridge this? How do you engage this?
I'm really happy with those two examples too, because they both stem from business problems we had. One was on the Fiesta movement. That came about because we introduced the Fiesta to North America at an auto show, but the vehicle wasn't going to be around for a year. Normally you introduce a vehicle and within 6 months or so it shows up, but we had this huge gap of time, and how do you maintain the buzz and the momentum and the excitement for the Fiesta that was generated at the auto show in LA? So the Fiesta Movement Program was an opportunity to, if you're not familiar with the program, we gave 100 people we called agents. We went out and recruited Fiestas, and we put them on missions. We gave them the cars for 6 months, and they got to drive around. They did the various things we asked them to do, and it generated a tremendous amount of content. Now, that came about because we had a fundamental marketing problem, but immediately as we got into the campaign itself, it became a marketing and public affairs campaign. It was really the two organizations worked really well together, marketing creating a lot of content, public affairs doing a lot to amplify and continue to build on what we were doing. Interestingly, then the Ford Explorer, that really came about from a public affairs initiative on how do we break out of this auto show mold and do something innovative when we launch a vehicle. Rather than the same 3 or 4 shows in North America we always use, let's do something different. And then again, once the core impetus was designed from the public affairs team, the marketing team came in, added some additional assets, added some paid media support, and really kind of helped bring that vehicle, that entire campaign to life. So I think either of those, if they had just stayed in their respective silos, could have been good campaigns. But the fact that we worked together on both of them, they became great campaigns, and the kind of campaigns that you're proud of, and you end up talking about it at events like this. The one thing I would say, though, for sure, that I want to make sure everyone understands, and Ray alluded to this in the video, there's sometimes a perception that social media is free because it doesn't cost anything to put a Facebook page up. But you absolutely need to support any social media initiatives with paid media. The thing about having 800 million users on Facebook is that means there's 800 million pages out there people can go look at. You need to do something to bring the audience to you. You can have all the great content in the world, but if you don't support all of this work with a paid media campaign, particularly if it's a campaign you're looking at, a lot of that work might be for naught.
It's great. No, it seems like we're seeing a lot of common themes, if you guys have noticed, throughout this presentation about collaboration, about driving people to engage, about the fact that data is important, relevant value, culture. It's pretty amazing. So I'm gonna take a different turn, and this was written to me on one of these questions, and so I don't want to take too much responsibility for it, but being that I live in North America, but you guys all work on North American brands. How is global collaboration structured in your company? I mean, we live in a world where Facebook is a gigantic nation, right? All of these platforms are becoming huge platforms of true collaboration and true nations in that way that connect people in much deeper ways than we do in terms of geography. How do you guys deal with global collaboration in your companies? Do you find it more or less different to affect change in Europe, being far from the global headquarters? How does it work? Is it a benefit? I'm curious, who wants to take it first?
I would say that it is infinitely more complex and difficult working in Europe, but it doesn't have anything to do with how far we are from headquarters. It's just the complexity of the market in Europe. Whenever I'm trying to produce something, I have to immediately think, well, it's going to have to be at least 5 languages, if not 19, depending on how many you want to work with. So it's got really less to do with being an American company as it is just really understanding all the things that make Europe great in terms of travel and the culture that changes. Well, that's business culture that changes too when you drive 20 miles in any direction, depending on where you are. So it's pretty critical, I think, that the North American team understands that even though Europe and North America look very similar in terms of total market size, they are not at all similar when it comes to trying to implement programs, particularly from a pan-European standpoint. So we do what we can from a global standpoint. I mean, the brand stands for the same thing, and if we're doing our jobs, then a Ford is a Ford wherever you are. The product is the same product. What the brand stands for and the things that are the pillars of our brand and the brand promise to go further is the same regardless of where you are on the globe. But the realities of putting a tactical program together, I think, is where it gets complicated.
Yeah, I would say that that for us, some of those challenges have nothing to do with they're nothing to do with social media. The challenge of a large organization headquartered for us in New York, has always been there, and we have, as a company, historically really focused on really understanding and working across the matrix. So we have teamwork as a very clear principle within our organization, that collaboration is strong. And what we've really done, John alluded to some of the work that IBM have done, and we're nowhere near the scale that IBM have, but in terms of really building social tools into the day job of our employees has been fundamental to some of that transformation. So, as we think about really trying to empower collaboration, real-time working across a global environment where we have teams that are located across multiple time zones working on individual programs, getting some of those tools in place and really leveraging them is really key. And so we're certainly on a journey of trying to upgrade there. I think also from a structural perspective, organizations, we think about wrestling with how we truly want to engage with social. We've had to, at a senior leadership level, really take a look and think about what could work best as an organization. And so last year we actually created a team that really took on a role and a mandate for the enterprise as a global social media strategy team. Now, initially, that was based in New York, and that creates challenges as to how do you actually understand what's happening in your local market. So that team is scaling up. We now have people in place in London. We have people moving into Asia. So, working across the enterprise, that team's mandate is truly now to bring lines of business together. So as lines of business begin to mobilize and think socially, and we start to look at how do you socialize our business processes, that team starts to really play a critical part at acting as the glue and the facilitator to bring lines of business together. And I think the other challenge, and the other thing for us is, as a global company, we are still heavily scaled in the US. So if you think about scale and what social means and wanting to really socialize our programs, firstly, you have to truly build scale, because otherwise you can create, as Alex was saying, the best social program, but no one's actually listening. And so where we've started a number of our activities and focus areas and our innovation in the US, much of what we're now looking to do is really focus on international, bring real scrutiny to how do we truly bring some of that scale to international that then allows us to truly start to innovate in some of those business processes.
Well, I think the truth is that the future is in neither Europe nor North America, so invest in China and learn Mandarin. I think that when I find, what Social Tools does for IBM is it really flattens the organization, right? So if I'm looking for someone in IBM, location is the last thing the system takes into account when trying to find somebody. And half the time I'll be on an instant message with someone, or I'll be collaborating on a project. I won't even actually know what country they're in, right? And that doesn't necessarily matter. I think the language question is really interesting. I think also in Europe there are a lot of different, for us, especially internally, there are lots of different union laws in different countries around. It's not okay to give certain tools to one group of employees and not to another group. And then the language issue, I think, is the big one. I'm often surprised how often my German team asks me if I can translate something into German for them. I kind of thought they would be the one, they would have the specialists to do that. But then also, I think when you look at user-generated content, both internally and externally, I don't think anyone's really cracked the language issue around that one. I mean, we're kind of lucky in that the official language of IBM is English, and so by default, the user-generated content is in English. But some communities naturally take, if they're just for a particular geographic region, naturally adopt a certain language. And the question is, well, that's some great content. How do we A, recognize it, and B, socialize that across the rest of the enterprise when you've actually now got a language barrier in place? And I think it's the same for externally focusing communities as well. And I just think it's something that hasn't quite been cracked yet by anyone, really.
You guys both talked about big challenges that you guys are trying to crack, right? As well as less significant ones, but there are still challenges. What would you say is the single biggest obstacle as well as accelerator for social transformation in your company? John?
Say culture. I think it's there's while our culture is good, it can still always be improved. We have people who actively work on it. We're doing a lot of acquisitions at the moment, often people from small companies coming in, and social tools are a fantastic way to really accelerate that process and help people get to know the new organization and feel at home. But at the same time, it's right, am I really allowed to say this? Am I really allowed just to comment on someone's status? I don't know if they're important or not. What do I do? But at the same time, that culture can be incredibly powerful in terms of, I've seen, some magic happen in terms of people coming together and pulling together information and ideas in hours that would usually take months by using these kind of tools. And it's because they're prepared, open to ideas. They've got the culture of sharing and they've got the technology to match it. But at the same time, that culture still is the number one thing that I think is in the way.
Yeah, actually, I'd agree with that. And I think for us, the accelerator has truly been this leadership embracing of digital and also social. The recognition as a company that we have to innovate if we want to remain as a strong and viable company in the future has fundamentally galvanized the organization to really embrace change. And that leadership vision then provides the mandate and the openness for employees and teams to really go forward and really think about how we truly can do things differently than what we've done before. So that has been the single biggest driver for anything that we've done. I think the obstacle, two obstacles I have. One is trying to educate the organization that it's not all about Facebook. Has been a really significant
You think the IPO will help?
challenge. That's right. We every conversation that we have is, or I seem to have is, what are we doing or what should we do in Facebook? And that's really it's a relevant question, but it's not the only question. And so, truly educating our employees and educating our leaders around social, what social design truly is. It's not just a Facebook campaign. It's not about broadcast is really important. So, there is that whole educational cultural change. And I would say the other thing is, we talked about it before, is the only way to succeed, I think, as a big company within social is truly to leverage the enterprise, is to break down those silos. We talked about this difference, this PR and marketing space. When we started, and I'll talk about Facebook, we launched Facebook pages in our markets. It has been purely a PR drive. Over the last 12 to 24 months, the company's recognizing the need to truly widen that out. And so we're seeing the mobilization of cross-functional teams in the organization, in our local markets, to really grapple with, well, actually, what does this mean for us in a local market context? It is very different if we're trying to do something in Mexico than it is if we're trying to do something in the UK. So, we have to think about that, and we can't have that dictated from New York, and we also can't have that dictated purely by our PR organization.
Just really quickly on the well, first we get the same Facebook issue. So the number of companies say they want Facebook for the enterprise. And so you want to share photos and stalk your ex-partners in? I don't think so. But so we had the same issue trying to make that education, but it's learning lessons from it, but not necessarily just doing it. But the leadership thing is really important in terms of an accelerator. So we had a new CEO who took Ginny Rometty, who took over from Sam Palmisano, and she, instead of sending out an all-hands email saying, hi, I'm the new boss, she posted a 3-minute video on Connections. Didn't even send out an email saying, please go and look at our video. Right? It just spread virally throughout IBM, and it ended up having more visits than employees in the company. So clearly some people were looking at it 2 or 3 times. And the most comments that we've ever had on an internal piece of content. And that leadership then demonstrate, it shows that it's okay to use social tools internally, right? Because Ginny does it, so it's okay. And B, people went to the system to watch the video, and then we're like, I haven't seen this before. What else can I do? I've got a profile on here. I can link to people. I can da-da-da-da-da. And they suddenly started using the system and actually engaging. So that leadership is really important as an accelerator.
Yeah, not to be a broken record, but I would say culture is the same thing. It's just when you've got a large organization, it's inherently resistant to change. And we're just getting to where the executives can understand the digital dashboards and those metrics. And now I'm throwing in engagement and Facebook fans and social listening tools. And they're trying to make sense in something that's, and again, Ford is an innovative company, but big organizations generally don't move very quickly. And trying to get them to embrace the stuff as quickly as the space changes is a big challenge. Having said that, the leadership and the business culture of risk-taking is a thing that allowed us to do a Fiesta movement. To give 100 of our cars over to 100 people that we didn't know was a huge risk for the corporation. And ultimately, it came down to we have enough confidence in the product that we think the vehicle will tell its own story, and we're okay with that. Launching a vehicle on Facebook was unheard of. No one had ever tried this before. But again, that risk, obviously calculated risk-taking, is part of the culture of Ford, too, that allows us to do these innovative things.
It's really interesting to think about this. So how many people in the room are in marketing? How many people in the room are a CEO? How many people on the webcast are watching that are CEOs? It's really powerful what you guys are saying, because it's true across every single industry, ours as well. I mean, our CEO, Miles Young, is dedicated and focused on social. He's focused on digital. Many of you guys have met him. You know that that's his mission. And I think in order for the enterprise to change, it has to come from the top down. So then the flip on that is, and so you talked about education, and I'm going to riff for a moment to ask you a question here. How do you educate CEOs who don't have the time to get on these tools? Is it a PowerPoint? Is it a here's your Facebook page I'm setting up for you? How do you teach CEOs about this, or do you just, how do you deal with it? I'll take it to Carl.
So I don't have the privilege of training our CEO on social. So So there's all opinions expressed on my own here. But one of the so we're fortunate as a company. We have pretty digital savvy, and actually our vice chairman is the most digitally savvy person I think I've met. So that's incredibly inspiring for our team. And we have to remember, especially in these big companies, the leadership generally are not digital natives. So that is a fundamental challenge. So one of the things that we have talked about, and I have seen us start to utilize, is this sense of reverse mentoring. And so, traditionally in big organizations, top-down mentoring, it's the senior leader mentors the junior, and so that goes on cycle. But actually within digital, and particularly within social, the reality is the expertise and the knowledge is not in those senior leaders. So creating reverse mentoring programs where those experts are able actually to spend time with senior leaders of the company to share with them social tools and begin to talk about some of the things, I think is actually a really fundamental transformation of how organizations can work to really bring about change.
Yeah, I think we have a reverse mentoring program as well, but we use for exactly that. And also one of the things I've seen in other organizations is not to underestimate the sense of competition and ego with senior executives. So I work with one customer who they educated the executive by having them do they will be answering on the chat forums for half an hour between 12 and 12:30. So come and ask questions. So maybe there's someone else typing them in, but they get to see it and they get to experience it and they get to actually, I can actually reach out to people very quickly. So events like that. But what happened was the server crashed, because there were just far more many people asking questions than they ever expected. So then you had this interesting thing where they then had the next executive the following week who was determined to be more popular than the last executive and crash a server. Meanwhile, the IT guys running around like crazy trying to make sure the server never ever crashed again when the execs were on it. So you had this kind of little competition going. And that competition, even at the executive level, that gamification, you're not overtly getting them to play a game, but they are playing a game to some degree, and that kind of these guys are people too, and they have egos, and they get just as excited about these kind of competitive, especially CEOs can be very competitive instincts as well.
We're actually very fortunate that Alan Mullally, the CEO of the company, is very social media savvy and looks to Scott Monty, who runs the social media team in North America, for guidance, and he's very open to that. In fact, Jim Farley, our CMO, was talking on a panel, and he said, the thing is, if Alan's got a message from Scott Monty and from Jim Farley, he calls Scott Monty back first. Because he also understands that if it's a social media request, it's probably urgent, and it probably is something he needs to deal with immediately.
It's pretty powerful. It's pretty amazing that, that it's core to the success of these companies, and it's great. In one sentence, what will your organization be famous for in social in 5 years from now? Alex.
My vision would be Ford is still the company case studies are written about.
I would say tying social to business problems, but I'm not sure if we'll be calling it social in 5 years' time, so I don't know how to say.
I think for us, it would be being the successful financial services business that truly redesigned our business processes around the customer.
Great. Well, I've learned a lot. I think we're going to open the questions up to the floor. And this gentleman right here is Leo Ryan. He is our head of social at Ogilvy in the UK. And so you could shake his hand when he walks by as well. He's going to ask questions on the floor. Any questions?
If you could just introduce yourself.
Chris Lomas. John and Carl have touched on kind of social tools, and we've quite often talked about those as customer facing. But I wonder if perhaps John particularly could expand on social tools for within the enterprise, in terms of starting to create that social enterprise from the inside out, and touch on how you're thinking about security, because you think about something like Salesforce Chatter, and I can install that on my desktop or my laptop at work, and then I can go home and install it there, and hey, presto, you can download whatever you like. So, how important is security when privacy is a currency in a social world?
Yeah, so this is why organizations don't want Facebook for the enterprise, right? Because they don't, and we work with a lot of financial services organizations where there's lots of regulatory requirements, being able to go back and audit, 7-year expiration time and all this kind of stuff. So we build that stuff in from the ground up in terms of how we work and how we use it. But I think the genesis of social tools is always around self-interest. Right, we only ever invest. IBM is not a return on investment company. We're a return on everything company, right? And it's a really very heavily focused on return. So all these things, and I love the way you said you focused on 2 business problems, which was the key to success there. So I think that you have to. I mean, and a lot of customers, not just from IBM, but from lots of vendors of quote unquote enterprise social tools, they often work with organizations who might start with something like Yammer or Chatter or something like that, which is very kind of, let's take the external model and just recreate it internally, just to get a sense of, okay, so now it works, now we get it, okay, we get the idea here, but now we actually need to think of all the other things that go around the enterprise that are actually requirements in terms of privacy and these kind of things as well. The other thing that we find when you actually do provide social tools internally, it's a great way to actually train people on how to use tools externally. So if they're uncomfortable, I'm not quite sure how I should tweet, I'm not quite sure how I should promote my company in external social media, it's actually a very safe environment for them to practice how to work, how to talk, the general etiquette that goes around interacting in a social way rather than sending an email to each other. And then it's an environment that then gives them the confidence to go out and become a brand ambassador for you on external sites.
Others, come on. No? Yes? One. Great.
Hi, I'm Sophie from Shop Direct. I've got a question about kind of what your thoughts are on measuring incrementality of social media, and that's a particular challenge that I face quite frequently in my position. So just kind of any thoughts on that?
I didn't actually hear the key word there.
Measurement of social.
Measuring incrementality. Do you want to expand?
Incrementality.
Yeah, so from my perspective, I often get a challenge that any investment that we spend on social from a retail perspective is up against investment against an alternative above the line campaign. So I kind of get challenged with justifying the incrementality of a social campaign as opposed to the obvious incrementality of a press or TV campaign. And it's something that is often difficult to measure, and I just wonder if there was any kind of thoughts on approaches to that or on alternative strategies about it.
I would say one of the biggest challenges we have from Ford's standpoint is just the product life cycle of our products is so long that it can be 5 to 7 years before people replace their car. So we've kind of just reshaped the conversation to not be about incremental sales because it's really about building a community of advocates, and the point there is, and again to your point, this is very hard to measure. I know that the person who's interacting with the community manager in a given country may be buying a vehicle, but at the same time at the dinner table or at the pub, whenever they're having a conversation, they'll be an advocate for our brand. And that's where we're really focusing our efforts. But you're right, from a senior management standpoint, particularly if you're looking at marketing investment, how do you try and put a return against that? And again, it's really more reframing the conversation to, this is the right thing to do, and we know it's the right thing to do, but I'm not going to be able to give you the sales return you're looking for from the metrics that I have.
Yeah, I think actually that's a challenge that most businesses are currently grappling with is truly how do you measure the ROI of your social programs. And for us it's certainly been a reframing that we look at social not as not primarily as an acquisition channel. It's not a sales business for us. It is an engagement channel, and it's about developing advocacy, trying to develop promoters of the brand, and using that as a route to then drive downstream sales. And the attribution piece, that is definitely something that is challenging.
So I actually think that this is an area where we're going to see a lot of innovation in the next 5 years. I think the next Google or the next Facebook is actually going to be in analytics. And we're investing a huge amount in analytics. It's not my side of the business, but a huge amount in analytics to really try and drive, to get these kind of insights and be able to do this kind of stuff that you've been talking about. But I think for us, especially also internally, we have the same challenge. Why should we spend money on helping employees work together? But we have, I mean, there are some customers who can trace, masses. They tend to be anecdotal, right? So one customer posted an idea which ended up being the top cost saving in the bank. It was a bank in the States. The top cost saving in the bank for the entire year. Now the idea had actually been raised many, many times before in kind of traditional surveys and these kind of things, but because it was posted in a social context, it got improved upon, it got amplified, it got the attention of senior management, and then it got implemented. And they can trace that directly back, millions of dollars of cost saving, just actually to one post in a social media site. And several retail companies where ideas around changing the layout of stores have come from employees where you would never expect them to come in the organization. And again, literally, effectively tracing back millions of dollars of revenues just to what are effectively tweets.
Pretty amazing.
I think there's an interesting focus, shift in focus here on changing sales figures versus changing the business and its efficiencies. Is anybody of the audience, hands up if you're generally looking at changing sales figures with social? No one? 2, 3, 4 people trying to change sales figures, and how many people are trying to change business processes? A lot more. That's, I think.
What do the rest of you do?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question, Leo, because ultimately, it's still about sales, right? I mean, we're still having products, and we need them to be sold at some point. It's just really reshaping the time frame you're talking about. It's not about sales in the next 30 days. It's building long-term relationships that'll prosper the business over a long period of time. But ultimately, yeah, every marketing dollar is still about building sales. It's just a question of when.
And I think this is where you're really looking at social across the enterprise as well. So marketing is one component of it, and certainly as we think about our business, it is that business process redesign is really, really critical for us as we think about how do we actually start to innovate to truly bring appropriate products to market and use social as a way of powering the design of those products. And we see tons of great companies, Dell, Starbucks, do tons of great stuff around product design within the social space. But also bringing cost out of the business. So I talked earlier around social servicing. Those elements of redesigning how you think about servicing. We have this very transactional approach of service, but there is a community out there that actually wants to engage with your brand. How do you actually engage them and begin to leverage the power of the community as opposed to truly just think that all the assets that you have are just within the employees of your company?
So just again on the ROI side, I think I've seen more success with people rather than saying what's the ROI of this campaign that we're going to do in social, which again is kind of pushing social off to the side. Instead saying how are we actually going to use social to completely transform our marketing processes and our sales processes, right? What if every employee in the company could effectively be a brand ambassador and a sales agent for us? What if our customers could actually be sales agents for us? We don't pay them a salary, but they bring in revenue, right? And when you start to look at the ROI of, forget social, what if customers started selling for us, right? What if every employee started selling for us? What would that do with our marketing and our sales processes? What's the ROI of changing that? And by the way, we happen to do it using social technology, but don't worry about that. What we're actually doing is dramatically increasing the reach of our sales force at very low cost. Or R&D, right? What would it mean if we got more ideas from our customers and more ideas from outside the R&D department? How would that transform how we approach the R&D process rather than I want to run an idea generation session and it's going to cost this much, but I can't tell you what the return is.
Well, it's a true evolution from really short term to true long term thinking. Whether it's marketing, whether it's product development, et cetera. So it's pretty amazing. Are there any questions in the back side of the room? Because I know.
Hi, John. I want to follow up from your point. You mentioned about the talk is about socializing the enterprise. Where do you, as the panel, see social embedding into the enterprise beyond marketing and sales and externally facing?
So the question is, where do you see social embedded within the enterprise beyond marketing and sales?
So I think we covered some of this earlier. For me, though, social has to form part of every part of the organization. So it's not held as something you do just within marketing, but it's actually something that is embedded into all your business processes. So throughout the customer life cycle, we've seen transformation in HR, we've seen transformation in servicing. I think we'll start to really see in our company transformation in product development, transformation obviously within our marketing and our sales spaces. So it's quite, and our technology. And I think, John, you touched on this earlier. The IT piece is really fascinating, that there's transformation from where IT inherently have held the keys to all of our technology development. Most of what we're now doing is external. So there's a revolution going on within how IT actually works with the business and how IT can actually help the business achieve business objectives. So fundamentally, I think we'll see over time successful companies will really embed social in every part of their organization.
Question in here.
Right here.
Francesca Bria from Il Sole 24 Ore Financial Daily. My question, I will build on that. I would like to know more about resistance in introducing social within the organization, and if the logic of social is conflicting with hierarchies and decision-making ways within the organization and the way organizations learn and organizational structure. So what are the barriers?
So the question is, what are the barriers in terms of, and the resistance in terms of social being integrated within organizations?
Yeah, so I think that it comes down to the cultural point that we kind of discussed earlier. But I think there's always been resistance to change, right? That's why change is difficult, and that's why people who are successful at it do very, very well. So if you look back, I mean, I was preparing a presentation actually to a group of very skeptical people, and I went back and I found these articles, 1996, email is going to destroy the organization, right? E-commerce has no business in retail. All these kind of headlines from Computer Weekly, all these kind of people saying this is, and everyone's saying, no, this won't happen, this won't happen, this won't happen. And then it's kind of the same with social. And I used to get into arguments about this, but now I think that we're starting to reach a tipping point where the skeptics are actually on the side that have to prove the argument now. Whereas a year ago we had to prove the argument, but now it's kind of, well, okay, fine, just watch, right? just see what happens, because you're going to start losing very, very quickly. And I think your point around organization and hierarchies, I think the successful ones when you're looking at internal transformation and business processes are the ones where they combine it. Right? So for example, we do not want our finance people deciding which invoices they're going to pay by crowdsourcing which supplier has been the nicest to them the quarter, right? There is a very strict process we want them to follow, and there is a very strict hierarchy we want them to do it. And I think where I've seen some missteps is where people get maybe a bit too carried away, and they say, right, now we can completely get rid of our hierarchy and our structure, etc., because we've got some technology, which is crazy. That's a strategy, right? And guess what? The culture is going to be ingrained as hierarchical. So the ones that work are the ones that really match how it gets blended together. And it's not a rip and replace. It's not let's rip out the old structures and put new in. It's how do we take the best of both and apply them together. But I think before we used to have lots of arguments about whether we should work this way. Certainly with IBM now, it's the successful people who have been successful in their jobs and have been promoted and are in leadership positions are because they are working in this certain way. And that's not because they're using the technology, it's because they are culturally minded to share more, collaborate more, discuss more, work out loud more. And then the cream rises to the top when that happens.
So I want to wrap up now, but I want to thank you guys all for coming. I heard kind of three really key themes here that I think are interesting. The first is, I think, John's quote that culture eats strategy for lunch. When you're thinking about socializing your enterprise, you have to start with culture and start with the behavior. The second is Alex's point about calculated risk-taking. I think that's really key in terms of putting programs in the market that are iterative, in perpetual beta, learning from mistakes, and really kind of driving your organization forward in that manner. And the final point is instilling changed by doing things internally. I think the IBM work is a great case in point for that. I mean, these are 3 kind of great lessons to take away from this. So I wanted to thank you guys all for coming out and doing this today. Thank you, Brandon, for coming from New York. Appreciate it.